What's up? Welcome to Triple Take Cinema. We got Alex, we got Dustin, we got myself as well, the speaker, Kyle. We got three coming of age tales, or maybe a debate about things not being coming of age tales. I'm excited for it. We have Dustin watching a movie for the first time.
All three of these, first time.
All three of these.
Wow.
Dustin and I are really just pushing each other's boundaries, and that's what I'm here for.
Yeah.
It's very good. All three, but one true gem that he's been getting a lot of shit for in his life for not seeing, and we're finally rectifying that.
Accurate.
Yeah. So the movies that we're diving into this week are Taika Waititi's Boy, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind by Michel Gondry and Charlie Kaufman, and Persepolis. And Persepolis is a movie I came across back when I was able to actually watch movies in theaters, and I could go to little art houses, and it's an animated movie about a girl coming up in the Iranian Revolution. So yeah, I don't really know where to start. Does anyone have an idea of where they want to start? We're not going to start with Eternal Sunshine. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we should start with Persepolis. What I think is funny about that is our last episode was on uses of color in movie, and I was definitely cracking up to myself when Persepolis starts off in color, immediately switches to black and white with that flashback. Feels like a perfect entry point, and I'll just say I had not seen Persepolis before we did homework for this episode, and I really, really dug it. I thought it was a phenomenal movie. Um, yeah, Dustin and Kyle would love to hear your thoughts on Persepolis, and maybe Persepolis in the context of being a coming of age movie, Kyle, and kind of what your thought process was in picking it.
Yeah. So it's a movie, like I said, I saw it in the theater a while ago. I think I just saw it the one time, but it did have a pretty lasting effect on me. I think part of the reason that it had a lasting effect on me, I think her story is very good, but it's also one of those movies that makes you realize how much you don't know about the world. It's it's one of those, yeah, like I remember seeing this for the first time and just kind of over and over again this thought would hit me, and it would just be, I had no idea what was happening in that part of the world at all, in any way, shape, or form in the last, 40 to 50, 60 years. No clue.
Yeah.
None. And
I mean, certainly like in I don't think any of us, I'm assuming you didn't watch this in 2007 when it released. But even, I mean, thinking back to 2007, I was a sophomore, junior in college, and I had no concept of Iran beyond, geopolitical news, like mainstream news of
right. Same.
Not a great country that doesn't like America, but like the history of Iran, so much that is richly part of her story here. No concept at that point in my life. And frankly, not even really into the last like 10 years that I really wrap my head around, the last 50 to 60 years of Iran and like how much changed and everything there.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that. I did actually see this in the theaters when it came out in 2007. Yeah, it was a movie that I was, 2007, I would have graduated college. This would have been around, me really getting a little bit into film more seriously and being stuck in kind of Rochester in between stops in my life. And it was a great little art house there that was playing it. And it was just, I think I had almost an unlimited movie pass there, or like something that allowed me to go see movies for like $4. And it was just the kind of thing that I saw, and I was like, oh, that looks really interesting. And I mean, the animation itself, I think is, so for me, yeah, it was like a little bit of any coming of age tale that also teaches me something. I feel like maybe has a little extra, teaches me something in an entertaining way. It just has a little bit extra, and it also has that whole section where she goes to France and she gets into that pseudo philosophical group and of the nihilists, and that was stuff that I was into at the time. So the whole thing, though, but the animation I think it's gorgeous, and it's kind of amazing what can be accomplished with just a lot of black and white and a lot of really deft transitions
Mm-hmm.
between, like to be able to spin. It's frankly a lot to tackle the young girl's her story, and also the entire story of that change in Iran. And yeah, I just, there's it also is and this does tend to happen in some coming of age tales. Frequently it does, I would say, because at some point you have to cut it off, right? But this movie, more than anything, at the end, I was like, oh man, that's where we end this. Like, it feels like there's a whole nother epoch in this person's life, and that little coming of age tale from the time where she was super young to, like, what, 22. When she kind
It's
of
a long
forges off in
span
it.
that we were along for the ride for.
Yeah, it definitely is. But it really, and I feel this way also, like about a lot, and we'll get to this in Boy as well. But the movie's ability to handle really difficult emotional, physical situations, but just I, while still maintaining lightness a lot of the time, was something that I didn't have a true appreciation for or a memory of when I watched it the first time. And I think it's something that I almost feel I had to age into, in terms of being able to really understand, when I see this in 2007, I'm 23, 24. I'm still kind of in that period of time in my life where I'm like all extremes. And so
Mm-hmm.
the ability to handle something that uh, that important in that part of the world, and kind of some huge changes that are having impact. I mean, 6 years is not that Iran and whatever, but like the Middle East, and obviously 9/11 was kind of like all like really burst into my life in a way where, I mean, yeah, like the Gulf War was a playing card set for me. And this, 9/11 to the next 10, 15 years after that, obviously the Middle East becomes much more on the forefront of kind of our experience. And so, yeah, as a coming of age tale, I think it does really well. It doesn't like sit too, like, it really moves quite
Oh yeah.
quite fast.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think that's a testament to some of the animation as well, like really weaving very quickly. Like, you're in her life, you're in the bigger revolution, you're in these characters, you're having these one-off conversations with people that are involved in the struggle. Um, and yeah, I mean, it just kind of, it really, I guess it really felt like it took me there, to that time and
Yeah.
place, and allowed me to get into that world very, very deeply. And also, it was interesting to have, like, when I was growing up, we had, for a couple of years, we had a refugee from Kosovo live with us, and it was certainly something that shed a lot of light on that, of this displacement of a young person due to safety concerns in their country, and how you do that to try to help a person, but what it can open them up to, not necessarily worse, but it's not safe waters. And kind of seeing the absolute lows that she went to during the journey, to be able to
Yeah,
pick
man, the
herself.
Vienna portion of the movie is like pretty harrowing. It gets really
Yeah,
dark what happens to her, and like, you know, coming back um to Iran, and like her perspective, and how, she just wants to not talk about that with her parents, but that made a big impact on me too. Uh, just seeing like where she goes in that middle portion when she's in Vienna and she's finding herself, and shit gets real. Even, with the comparative context of everything happening back home geopolitically in Iran.
Yeah. I feel like I mean, to kind of bevy off of what you said earlier, Alex, in terms of the color and how, the movie, anybody listening should know this by now, but it's fully animated, and it starts in color identify present day and then transitions for flashback. Most of the movies told in flashbacks, in black and white. But even in spite of that, like the dimensionality that they accomplish with the animation, is really like enthralling and really captures your attention and keeps you engaged. And I'll be honest, like the cover for this, the DVD artwork is something I certainly recognize seeing, no doubt, in 2007, 2008, like on the shelf at Blockbuster or a local video store. But at the time, it didn't call to me, and I can't honestly say that even in a year ago, even 6 months ago, obviously, because this is the first time I've seen this movie, like sliding through it on streaming, I don't think I would have ever felt compelled to tune in and watch this. And in a way, I feel like the cover, like my initial gut reaction would be because the animation style in the cover like doesn't look that appealing to me. And candidly, I feel like in general, animation, when it's not clearly, like when it's not how a traditional, like normative view of like, oh, it's a Pixar movie or something, animation to me feels it's there's a bit of a higher barrier to entry, which there shouldn't be, because almost every time I've like pushed through that barrier to entry and watched an animated feature, especially like an adult animated feature that's not X-rated kind of a thing, but like an adult oriented one, I've always enjoyed it. I've always found it to be, maybe not always, but a lot of times I've found it to be like particularly enthralling. And especially, this wasn't like a documentary per se, but it was, nonfiction. I think that stuff always like hits me and reverberates with me, because this made me think of a animated documentary I saw uh, in 2002. I think it was called Flea, and it was basically about a refugee from Afghanistan who, I can't remember. I have it here. I don't remember what decade it was. But his story, he was gay, and his, coming of age in his sexuality, in his culture and things like that. And I loved that. I believe it was like a featured movie for film festival members of the Milwaukee Film Festival. And so my wife and I just watched it because we could see it for free. And I was floored by how enthralling it was. And that's exactly how I feel about this movie. Like I found the story enthralling. I do like current events and, politics and international affairs, and that stuff is interesting to me already. But the way that this story was told with her perspective, um, and her coming of age growth, but then also um, I don't think from our political alignment you would call what Iran had transitioned to over her lifetime as coming of age, but it's like anti coming of age, right? Like Iran culturally regressed in many ways due to the government rule. And both of those things, the dichotomy of them, I feel like was really compelling and interesting to me, and that the animation, by virtue of being animation, allowed the storytelling to be more nimble and to jump back and forth and to tell a grander story than it would have been able to tell were it nonfiction presented in what's the opposite of animated? Real footage.
Yeah.
Real life. Obviously the budget needs to be higher there and stuff, and that's all to say, yeah, like I this is, this combined with Flea, like now I'm like, okay, I really need to like start picking up both graphic novels and movies that I know are not kid animated movies, but like tell a serious story, even if the animation doesn't like initially like enthrall me. Like maybe the story will catch me enough that it doesn't matter, or like the story will catch me and I'll be like, oh no, this visually is a real treat, because this movie was such a treat visually. Which I feel like, yeah, the static animation on the cover belies that. But it makes me want to pick up the actual graphic novel it's based off of, because I feel like seeing it told over multiple pages and multiple minutes on film um, actually brings a lot of character and depth to that her style of animation.
Yeah, I have a couple of there's a couple of scenes that really stick out to me. Just that, yeah, I mean, kind of that this gripped me a little bit, and I can still picture very vividly. But I'm curious, do either of you have um, like a scene or an image from the animation that kind of sticks with you? And I'll give you my two as you ponder. But the two that I kind of go with is when the crowd is holding up the body of one of the protesters that was killed, and it's this you know that just an image that seems very. If that was a painting, you know what I mean? Like that'd be something that you could just hang up, and it would really
Well,
have an incredible amount of impact.
and that scene, and I think there's like two or three other that are, it's like the animation style even gets simpler, if I recall correctly. Like it regresses in a good way, of like there's less definition of faces and things like that. It becomes almost like a shadow puppet
Yeah.
kind of thing, which is not, I mean, I'd almost say that's it's becoming more cliche now, because I can think of at least two movies that I feel like that do that kind of shadow puppet storytelling, and that's one of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, and the new Candyman movie. Um,
Sure.
but it, like, when done well, as it's done here, it's a very effective way of kind of delineating between, like, okay, like this, the rest of the movie is her story from her perspective and what she knows about it, and then this is like showing the real events of what happened as they happen, kind of a thing. So I didn't mean to
No.
derail from that, but I those scenes in particular stuck out to me, all of them. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great one.
Yeah, the other one that really sticks with me, and it's more of a scene and less of an image, but it's when they break up the party, and the men are running away on the rooftops, and they all jump, and this one guy hesitates and jumps and doesn't make it in between, and the way that the information is given is just kind of devastating, and the way that the guards just walk up and look over and just kind of shrug their shoulders, like, all right, well, got one, I guess, is just so indicative of the struggle that they are all going through to somewhat be free, and there's just nobody there to, yeah, like she has all this support but she has to leave it. I don't know. And then I guess the third one that always sticks with me is when the mother faints the first time that or faints, or I'm not really sure exactly what you want to call it, but yeah, it just kind of collapses when she says goodbye
Mm-hmm.
to her the first time. And yeah, that scene, this was, it's
Yeah,
always
really
amazing. Yeah,
powerful.
really powerful stuff, and it yeah, affect all these things affect me so much more now that I have a kid, and boy, was rough in a lot of ways because of that. But yeah, what about images for you, Alex?
Yeah, I'm glad you commented on the definition, Dustin, in relation to just the overall animation style. Because as you were talking about why this didn't grab you, I had a similar reaction to seeing trailers for this, seeing um, posters. We own the graphic novel, so I've seen just the cover of the graphic novel, and something about the animation style where it was so, and I keep thinking of words like, simplistic or crude, and those are more derogatory than I think I I intend, which really is that kind of, it's not going for a photorealism and it's not going for really highly detailed. It's using these kind of, simplistic drawings and these very kind of clean, clear lines to tell a very emotionally complex story, and how that contrasts with um, maybe the more kind of straightforward pared down animation. And I think an example of that that really resonated with me is when our protagonist's name is Margie.
Marjane.
Yeah, Margie, where Margie is in the schoolyard, and the nuns are reprimanding her for her denim jacket with the punk is dead. And the way that they're animated, where they have no like bodies, where their religious garb just makes them look like serpents, who are kind of like coiled and waving upright, I thought was so powerful and impactful. It communicates a lot of the subtext about religious fundamentalism and how that's kind of the homogeneity of that is something that's a negative impact on Iran culturally. And I just love the image of them as serpents kind of slithering around. Um, Marge and really being an oppressive force. The other animation moment that really stuck out to me was just one I thought was funny as hell, and it's when she's going through puberty and it's communicating like the gangly awkwardness of puberty and like her nose like blossoms forward and then like her boobs pop out and it's just a great little visual shorthand, great little gag that uses the animation. And again, I think it uses the more pared back animation style to its strength to make the joke funnier because you're just getting that pure silhouette. You're getting the pure like nose, kind of shooting outward. But those are my two picks.
Yeah, I was gonna say that the puberty scene for me was just the one that like I feel like really used the to exactly what you said basically, Alex, like used the fact that it was animation to kind of show the absurdity and the awkwardness of it in a way that, kind of hit home for me, and just thinking of like things changing without your control, and like suddenly you feel like you're this different person. And I thought it did a good job too of effectively speeding up the story, or where we were in her story, in a fun but relatable way, right? Like where she transitioned from being a child to growing up through puberty. In that sequence was so short, but like kind of moved us ahead in the story a little bit. And then yeah, like all of the to Kyle, to your point, all of the things about like what was going on, and the retelling of certain events that she did not witness or anything but heard about. And um, when it stepped back and became more simplified in that shadow puppet kind of style, it really doesn't give you much visual details and intricacies to focus on, so you're really kind of taking in the core components of whatever it's portraying on screen. And in this instance, they were all pretty devastating and difficult imagery that was being portrayed, but I think the starkness of it even had a stronger underscore on what was being told and how it was being shown.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm really glad I put this on the list. Then it was the third one I put on the list because I was trying to find something that I don't know, it was a little bit different. And I'm glad that it's something that you had both. It had been orbiting both of you.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah, like I said, it's definitely something that
Absolutely.
I've like seen, like visually, like the cover very much is familiar to me, but I don't think I ever comprehended, that it was a autobiographical story, that it was based on a graphic novel, that it was about Iran. I don't think any of that clicked through. Like I thought it was probably fiction, and um, just was completely uninterested in it. And I will say too, I mean, very clearly, I mean, spoiler, I think all three of these qualify as coming of age, but this one is like a easy 110%. Like,
Yeah, it checks all
I
the
mean,
boxes.
yeah, like there's you can't argue that this isn't a coming of age story in any way, shape, or form.
yeah,
One thing I
yeah,
really loved about this in the context of our coming of age discussions and watch is just even more than Boyhood, which is wild given the amount of time that Boyhood covers and just the scope of that project. This really hammered home to me that coming of age isn't a moment in time. It's not like, a fixed point where you come of age. It's a continuum, and it's one that
Mm-hmm.
like stretches over years and years. And I thought this was communicated so well in this movie. And maybe it is that animated style with all of the time jumps and um, you're just traveling locations. But I think it's really about Margie's characterization and the way that you see her view of the world kind of evolve and change, where it starts off very childlike, where she's absorbing and regurgitating the political opinions of everyone around her. I rewatched the first 30 minutes today, and there's that line she has about, well, the Shah was great. My teacher said the Shah was great, so therefore he is. Um, and you just see, you see the evolution of her kind of political consciousness, and it was really cool to, as a viewer, to see coming of age treated as such a continuum, both in the sense of, physical, emotional maturation, but also, what it looks like to develop a budding political awareness and, a really like fierce spirit of resistance. And that all resonated with me super strongly.
Yeah, and I really liked, to that point, I really liked the as the grandmother plays obviously a central role and is
Totally.
this
Great character.
Yeah, an amazing character, and is this non-parental person that she can go to for information and just conversations about what's going on and what to do and comfort as well. But then there's that one scene where the grandmother really gives her a lot of shit for not, and that to me really, it was a nice, I'm not going to call it a bookend, but like it was a nice counter to that early bit where she is a kid and, everyone is trying to teach her, but protect her at the same time. And she, she's absorbing everything. She's taking it in. She goes and sees her uncle as he's a political prisoner, and which is an insane scene to think about doing as a young child. And then to have her go through all that stuff and go through Vienna and whatever, and then the grandmother at some point has to act as this like big check on a lot of that early or late teenager, early 20 something type of attitude about life that I thought was just a very special moment in the whole thing. But I loved it. It did win an Oscar for best foreign language film, which is probably another reason why you like heard a lot. Oh, it was just nominated. Sorry, it was just nominated for best animated feature for the year. Probably lost out to some Pixar movie, but and I'm sure whatever Pixar movie it lost out to was good. But this is one that for some reason I really gravitated to when it came about. So
Ratatouille.
Yeah, Ratatouille is pretty good.
Yeah.
All right, Ratatouille is my favorite Pixar movie, so It is. I freaking love Ratatouille.
Wow.
I have a special connection to that movie.
I've watched a lot of Ratatouille.
Do you have a rat that helps you cook? Is that your connection? Or do you have a rat that has you do all your writing?
Yeah, that's how I write and edit. There's a rat that sits in the back of my hoodie.
Okay. Well, you are wearing a hoodie right now, so you're not.
It's real, dude.
Yeah, seems
like a rat GPT. That's what it's called.
I mean, realistically, you could just have it run around the keyboard and hit all the keys. That's how it would happen.
Yeah, but without the marionette elements, it's just not as fun. I like to spice it up.
Yeah. All right, well, let's get into Boy. This was one that I had not seen, and this is one that I don't even know how I found it. If I'm honest with you,
I'm surprised I've never heard of this because, like,
me too.
Like, I do like Taika Waititi. Is that how you say his name?
Taika Waititi.
Taika Waititi. But this is like his second movie. Like, I remember Eagle vs. Shark. I never saw it, but I remember seeing the cover of it. And I love What We Do in the Shadows. That's like one of my favorite like mockumentaries of all time. And obviously I'm familiar with his more recent work with Thor and Jojo Rabbit and stuff.
I was going to say Jojo Rabbit.
But I had not heard of this at all.
When I think of Taika Waititi early film coming of age, I think Hunt for the Wilder People, and I had no idea that Boy even existed until you put it on this list, Kyle. And I'm so glad you did, because I love this movie as well. I thought it was a great ride.
Yeah, it really. I mean, this movie I was watching. I mean, it starts, and I like to think, and so I'll live in this fantasy land. I like to think that if this movie came on in a dark room with no context, that I would get, and not just because it takes place in New Zealand, but I would get 15 minutes into it and be like, "This is a Taika Waititi movie."
Oh yeah,
because
absolutely,
he is such a mass. Like, he is a master of this space of levity in these devastating situations that breeds the ability to get through them and weather them in a way that also kind of is able to portray that there's nothing to do but get through them, and so you might as well have levity. It's like it's hard to like express, frankly, but it's something that Taika Waititi and Jojo Rabbit's a great example of this. But like the ability to just sit in these moments and have things happen that are devastating but somehow inspiring at the same time. And he takes you on this like very confused emotional journey, but you're like with it the whole time. Yeah, I really really liked it, and there were so many moments that just wrecked me. I don't even really know where to begin. And the characters, the character he plays, the dad, it was just like difficult to watch at times, but also like that when I don't even know where to begin, but like the scenes where like the dad's role with the family initially is just like, well, this is obviously the worst. Like you just abandoned just your family essentially, but then you slowly get these pieces of the picture about the events that took place and the mother dying in childbirth and like what that did to the father and what that's done to that family unit in general and how they all stay together and idolize this person who's not away. And God, that moment where he asks him not to call him dad.
Yeah. Well, for me, the moment that was, I feel like I always get a little triggered. Maybe it's not the right use of that word right now, but a little emotional gut punch in movies that are really centered around like a father and son relationship. I lost my dad when I was 21, which is a lot later than a lot of people lose their dad, but it was really unexpected. So like there's a fondness for me and an affinity, and that's the extent to which the story in this movie relates to my personal life. Like my dad was not a deadbeat dad kind of deal, and didn't just disappear. But the scene towards the end when Boy realizes, that the pedestal he'd put his father up on isn't real, and specifically when he, prior to that, we see a flashback where after Boy's younger brother is born, presumably, his mother died giving birth, and her mother or his grandmother and then his dad are there crying in the room, and then we've come to find out later on that his dad actually wasn't there, and that's when he realized, like, all of these things I've held in high regard for my dad are not true, and whatnot, and he kind of goes and attacks his dad, and seeing that dynamic of when he's like hitting his dad and his dad's kind of powerless to stop him, even though he totally could stop him, but you can kind of see in a way his dad feels like he deserves it, or doesn't feel like it's unwarranted. That was like the 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 point to me that like hit the hardest, and seeing that. I mean, that's, I guess, if there was a moment in this movie of the coming of age, to your point before, Alex, like that's kind of it here, right? Where he has this kind of paradigm shift of realizing,
Totally
like,
agreed. It happens in that moment. That's when it
yeah,
like it bubbles over.
yeah. And then, I mean, I guess not that we can't go back and talk about other parts of this, but like the poetry for me at the end, when Boy and his brother go to their mother's grave and their dad's just sitting there, after presumably he had left and gone away. Um, I thought that was wonderful, and how neither of them hesitated to just go and sit. And Boy kind of was like, "Okay, like this is okay. Like I appreciate you having this emotion, Dad, and whatnot." And then for his brother to ask him how Japan was pretty great too. that was a good little punctuation point at the end. But yeah, everything like leading up to that, like felt very, very authentic and charming in a way. And you can see, uh, his dad Alamin like kind of want to be dad, but also completely shrugging off the idea of being dad, to your point, Kyle, of when he tells him to not call him dad. But you can also see like little glimmers of him like being like, oh yeah, like these two kids are my sons. Like I have a role with them, but I don't really know what it is. So I'm trying to figure out what that role is while I'm also here trying to find my money, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think part of what I loved so much about this movie is that Alamin, the father figure that Waititi plays, is not a one-dimensional shithead. He has
Mhm.
like he has redeeming qualities that we see throughout the movie. We see his charisma and his likability. We see his affinity for pop culture that yes, he takes it way too far, and that is part of the dismantling of the hero worship with just how obsessed he is with ET, but that's a charming trait that's passed along to Boy. Um, and what I love is that we as viewers kind of immediately know the score when we see Alameen and we're introduced, and it's like, oh, we know this character. He's the deadbeat dad who's rolling up with his
He's
jail
a piece of
friends.
shit. Yeah.
He's a piece of
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think one of the joys of this movie is that while it is demystifying the hero worship that Boy has built up, it is also giving Alameen shades of gray for the viewer and making him more nuanced and likable. So it's almost happening in reverse, where we start at opposite points, where Boy has him up on this pedestal, the viewer has him way down here, and
Yeah.
we kind of shift to the middle. Um, and the moment that happens towards the middle of the movie that really encapsulates that for me is when Alameen tries to slide over the hood of the car, and he's doing like I forget if he's doing like 90210 like reference or
No,
something, but
Beverly
uh
Hills Cop or something.
thank you.
it's no, it's or am I misthinking? He's getting in the Dukes of Hazard, isn't that
Oh
Yes,
what
yes,
Dukes of
yeah,
he's in
yeah,
Dukes
yeah,
of
Hazard.
yeah, yeah,
Hazard?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
He's
yeah.
That's totally it.
he's jumping into the window.
Right. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
so drawn out, like as a viewer, that's comic gold, and it made me like Alameen more because it's like this guy is so like klutzy, it makes him more endearing. And yet for Boy, he's having his, you know, hero worship of his dad kind of shattered a bit in that moment. So I love how it's working in two different ways on both the viewer and on Boy.
It's interesting. I mean, I hearing you say that, I feel like you're probably right in Boy's perspective of it, but I feel like in that moment in my head, I'm like, oh, this is. I mean, I feel like you could argue this based on like at the end when Alameen and his two friends get beat up, but Boy initially sees it as they're beating the other guys up. Like I was like, oh, Boy's not seeing this happen like this at all. Boy's seeing him do a flawless Dukes of Hazard impression and get into the
Sure.
car. Like this is one of those moments where his, diamond glasses are filtering out the awkward and terribleness of this, and he's seeing this like uh perfect iteration of his dad. Rose colored glasses is what the term I
Right.
was looking for. And so he still has them on at that point. But yeah, like either way, like I guess, I mean, what you're saying could work just as well. But that was how I kind of interpreted it, is like, okay,
Totally.
we as the viewer now get to see how hapless Alameen is in a moment that very easily you can be like, oh yeah, like I can see how, a 7-year old, 8-year old, 9-year old kid could like have a completely different perspective of this in his memory and think it was like the most badass thing on the planet.
Yeah. So good.
And it's interesting to think about this, against Persepolis, in terms of the time that's handled, right? Like there's not this is a very small window
Two
of time.
weeks, less than 2 weeks. Yeah.
And
Right.
I kind of like that about the genre in general, and how it is a continuum, but it's one that like can only also be kind of understood in the moments, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and we want to think that, and just like our own lives, you want to think that like there's moments that have these huge lasting impacts, but it's all this weird flowing, and those moments are the ones we remember. But like there's very rarely like light bulb moments in our development. I feel like,
Yeah.
and even in the scene where he runs after him and takes the jacket back and all sorts of stuff, like that's the begin. It's one of the beginnings of the fall from grace in his eyes that leads
Right.
to that fight in the kitchen. And to be able to show, it's also a coming of age tale that it's a coming of age tale that I don't feel like I have a lot of. Persepolis felt like it had a decent amount of resolution, even though it starts off right again at the end with a new adventure. But so much happens that you feel there's like almost like a sense of closure in a certain way.
Yeah.
And I just don't feel that way in this one, which is, I mean, there's certainly, yes, there's a bit of closure, sure, but it's really more of like, I don't know what is gonna happen to these kids, these children, like what their next life is like. It's a very uneasy feeling to go through this whole episode of their lives, and then just kind of be like, I guess it's just going to continue, and he'll have to figure out everything on his own for him and the family and all sorts. I don't know. It's just
Right.
it's so interesting
It's
how
kind of
different.
yeah, no, that's a great comparison. And it's kind of the undercurrent of tragedy that's running throughout this movie for me, is that there's this whole subplot about boy not understanding what the word potential means and trying to define it. And like, that's obviously the implication. That's the fear hanging over this movie, is that boy is going to turn out exactly like his dad. Um, and for me as a viewer, even though, their lives aren't any easier when the credits roll, all of these like really big problems for this little family are still facing them. Um, I think boy, just having that awareness of who his dad is and letting himself kind of dismantle the pedestal and undo the hero worship that he's done in the first 10 years of his life, was enough for me as a viewer to be like, okay, you know, boy at least has an understanding to maybe let himself move beyond what his father's path was. So I see it as a hopeful ending, but it's one that has a lot of tragedy, and I feel like it's a lot of tragedy about um, I might be saying this wrong, but the Maori people, and just kind of like this socioeconomic slice of life in New Zealand where they're dealing with immense poverty. They're dealing with, isolation and all of these kind of socioeconomic hardships where it probably is super hard to, quote, make something of yourself in the way that we think of. Um, so yeah, I don't really have a definitive answer there, but I thought the movie was hopeful in terms of boys' developments, but while having a lot of, um, you know, realistic tragedy about the circumstances he's living in.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
to me is like, that is the space that Taika Waititi can just knock out of the park.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the just sitting with all of that in all of its richness, positive, negative, tragic, happy,
Yeah.
bittersweet. It's really, it's masterful. And then you get an amazing like combination thriller haka at the end, which is
Yeah.
also,
Yeah.
I thought that was a nice way to end it, like a very Taika Waititi way to end it.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of charm in movies like this that tell that weighty story and hit that kind of emotional note while still having a good healthy's not the right word, a good amount of humor, not an insignificant amount of humor. Like I would call this uh, at some degree like a comedy. Like Wikipedia has
Sure.
it as a comedy drama. I would maybe flip those around, maybe not. I don't know. But I feel like I would definitely tell people that this is like a comedy in some way, shape, or form. It's not like there's just a couple haha laughs in it. Like, no, like there's straight up like bits that are kind of not, sketch comedy played for laughs, but there's stuff in here that is literally just serves the purpose of making you laugh.
Right.
Um, a non-example of that, because there is more purpose to it, but I did appreciate going back to what you said, Alex, about the through line of Bowie not knowing what the word potential means. Like I really did appreciate when he looks it up in the dictionary, and I forget what the exact definition is in the dictionary, but it basically references another word, because I feel like that's entirely relatable to anybody who looks up a word they don't
Yes.
know. And
Yes.
the dictionary just tells you that it's something else, another version of another word. Um, I also really appreciated the use of the his brother Rocky's like sketch animation
Yes,
for
that
some
was so good.
elements in here. Like, and I'm curious. I'd be really curious to know if that was uh, a product of, if that originated as like a budgetary restriction in some way, or just working within the scope of budget for this, or if like, I guess being like, oh, did they want to show some version of those scenes a little more and they couldn't, so they just used that style of animation, though I know most, if not all of those, were more kind of fantastical elements. But I appreciated that kind of whimsy that was in here. And I feel like the first one happened within the first 10 minutes, which to me kind of telegraphed a like a level of whimsy and I'm trying to think of a better word for it. That just a little lightheartedness more than maybe I was initially expecting, um, which I probably should have expected, knowing the director and writer and everything. But yeah, like I think that, and it shouldn't surprise anyone that like knowing how closely related that humor and comedy and tragedy and sadness are all kind of connected, that a movie that really can like hit both of those notes of the humor and drama, really can imbue you with that greater level of like, wow, that really is heavy and um, emotionally intense, but um, while still making you laugh out of the side of your mouth and out of the front of your mouth half of the time it's going on too.
Totally. Yeah. And I don't think you can talk about the animation sequences and Rocky without talking about the emotional core behind all of that, which is super fucking tragic, which is that it's his way of processing his mom's death during childbirth to be like, oh, I have superpowers. I
Mhm.
caused mom's death. So I'm going to process, my trauma through my creativity and my imagination. And it's exactly as you're saying, Dustin. It's funny, it's whimsical, but like we've been saying again and again, it's got that that strong emotional core that just lets it land on that tragic level as well. And I think you might be onto something with the animation being potentially a budgetary restriction. I think this movie is a classic example of you know, restrictions being a boon for innovation and being a boon for
Mhm.
art in that, like, being forced to work in these narrower parameters than, something like Thor, Love and Thunder, which I was not a big fan of, um, you know, makes me think that, maybe Taika works really well in this kind of register where he has less tools to play with, and that kind of forces him to think about how to use those tools creatively.
Yeah.
Oh yes. All right. I feel like we worked those well, and I'm so yeah. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Let's let's get into it. Let's get into it. And I don't even want to say anything. I just want to, Dustin. I want to hear your thoughts on it. I don't want to say anything. I don't want to hear from Alex yet. I'm just very curious. You finally watched this movie that everyone's been telling you to watch.
Yeah.
What how to play for you? What did you think? What did you like? What did you not like? The whole thing. Give me
Yeah.
everything.
So okay, so my connection with this movie, it's 20 years old now. Came out in 2004. It's
Woo!
2024.
So old. We are
So if that's
so
gonna make
old.
you feel old, if that doesn't make you feel old, I do not know what can.
I went to a 30th anniversary tour of an album I like recently. That made me feel just a little older.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Continue.
Um, so my only actually no, that's not true. Okay, so my connection, like familiarity with Michael Gondry is, or Michael. How do you say his name?
Michelle.
Michel. Michel Gondry. Um, not going to edit that out. Just let me mispronounce everyone's names. With Gondry is I saw Be Kind Rewind when it came out. That's with
Nice.
Jack Black and Mos Def, and I remember liking it. I don't remember rewatching it, so I must not have liked it that much. I'd be open to revisiting it. And then I watched The Green Hornet when that came out in 2011. Do you guys remember that was a movie that existed?
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
That's one I want to rewatch because I love Christoph Waltz. Like I could watch him read like the instructions to a ceiling fan installation manual. He's phenomenal. But beyond that, like I think I had a little mini poster of The Science of Sleep, which came out 2 years after Eternal Sunshine. I never saw it. Science of Sleep. I probably know a dozen people that would say Eternal Sunshine is like in their top 5 movies of all time, and it just never fell on my plate to watch, which is wild having watched it and thinking of mentally how I was in 2004. That was my junior senior year of high school. Around that time, and I'm not comparing these. I think one aged much better than the other. But Garden State came out. I like loved Garden State. I feel like I compartmentalized Eternal Sunshine with Garden State and a lot of these other like existential artsy kind of movies that came out around that time. And it just I don't know. I think if I had to give you a reason, like if you put a gun to my head and said like why didn't you watch this movie, I'd say like Kate Winslet's hair in all the trailers, like all the different colors, kind of was like I'm like this is just weird. Like I didn't find that attractive. Um, I don't care about that now, but like that would have been my biggest justification because I had my only concept of her work was Titanic, which was fine. I was a Jim Carrey fan, and I was a dramatic Jim Carrey fan. Like I love Truman Show and other stuff he had done over the years that was dramatic. So it wasn't like, oh, The Mask and Dumb and Dumber Jim Carrey is the only Jim Carrey I want. So I don't really have a good reason why I never visited this. I thought it was great. I found it to be. I watched it today, and I'm kind of glad I did, even though like I was feeling kind of shitty. I'm like, we've been putting this off for like 5 weeks, and I'm like watching the last movie today. But it kind of works out right to like not watch it 5 weeks ago and then have to recall for the podcast. I found it a little bit disorienting, but I know that was deliberate. Like that kind of engrosses you in the story more. It was heavy. It was I don't want to say it was depressing because it felt real in a way. Um, it it felt like I appreciated at first I didn't really care for like the real world stuff with Tom Wilkinson as the doctor and Mark Ruffalo and Kirsten Stewart and that stuff and Elijah. Like I was like this whole like procedure stuff, but I actually appreciated the fact that they were just like, yeah, this is something we can do. It exists in this world. It's not like this super slick, like, oh, watch the like he sees a commercial on TV and it's like this sexy trailer of like this futuristic science thing. It's like, no, it's like the shitty office in New York with like wood paneling. Like I liked that. And I will say without getting too much into my issues, I watched Pleasantville for the first time last night.
Oh,
I
awesome.
enjoyed that.
Interesting.
But I could go on for an hour about and I to be clear, I did enjoy that movie, but I could go on for an hour, and I went on for about 20 minutes last night with the friends I watched it with about like what are the fucking rules of this movie? Because there are many things in Pleasantville that just are like, wait, what? Like that doesn't make sense. But then they counter like that they went back on that, and I find it like I try not to be that person in a movie that's like, well, how does this work? Why is it that explained? And this movie just told you just enough. Like, it was so confident in like, yeah, this is the thing that people can do, erase a memory, and like that I bought. And then as it went on, like the drama with them at the house and stuff, I kind of liked more and more. I liked and I understand the purpose more and more of like why Elijah Wood's character had to be like the creeper that was like trying to get with her, because that's what kind of triggered him to realize that he didn't want to lose his memory of her and everything. I really, really did appreciate the uh, whatever you want to call it, like foreshadowing, like the opening sequence before they cut to the credit, and then you
Yeah.
realize at the end that you're actually watching the end of the movie. I thought that was kind of wonderful to be able to see right before you get to him waking up and after he lost all of his memories of Clementine. You get to see his memories of their first meeting in Montucket, and you're like, wait a minute, I thought we had just seen their first meeting, and then you're realizing, oh no, 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 I'm seeing their meeting. That's their re-meeting that's happening after it. I think the other thing I will say is like I feel like I'm really glad I watched this at this point in my. I mean, I could have watched it at any point in the last 5 years for this to count, but like at a point in my life where I'm happily married to the love of my life, like um, if I would have watched this in 2004, I probably would have liked it, but for a different reason, because I thought it was like introspective and whatnot, but I don't think I would have related to it in a certain way that I do now. Um, I don't think it would have carried the same weight for me as it does now in terms of the beauty of kind of appreciating your partner's flaws and how that's kind of a necessary component of a relationship. Um, yeah, and like functionally, I really just enjoyed the kind of disorienting take of going through these, especially early on when he starts to realize, oh, like they're getting rid of these memories, and he's like seeing himself, and he's talking to the doctor, and like the doctor's like, oh no, I'm actually part of your brain too, like I'm part of your imagination too, you're just imagining me, like that kind of stuff. Like I thought that was done in a really cool way. Like I appreciate how much of it was done grounded in realism. Like it could have been very easy and arguably appropriate for a movie about like his memories and whatnot for it to be much more fantastical. But I really appreciated how realistic it was. And yeah, I not right now, but I want to rewatch this. I feel like this is something I can appreciate more on a rewatch, even because right now, honestly, like I'm probably sitting at like 4 out of 5, but I'm probably going to sleep on it because it feels like a movie that needs to maybe percolate a little more in my subconscious to like really hit home. Um, but yeah, I really liked it. I can see why everybody speaks so highly of it. I feel like it aged phenomenally well, with the exception of the use of cassette tapes. But everything else, I feel like it did really well. And that's to say, like, I rewatched Garden State within the last year for the first time in probably like 13, 15 years. And that came out almost 20 years ago. And I enjoyed it, but I felt like it was so much a product of its time, that I like was like, this doesn't hold the same weight or anything. And Eternal Sunshine, I feel like, is done in such a great way that it doesn't even visually look like a movie. Like the cars and the streets and the people and their apparel, none of that feels like, oh yeah, this is back in the early 2000s or the 90s or something. Um, and maybe I'm talking out of my ass with that because I don't know exactly like how much fashion has changed and stuff, but like none of it felt like it could have been made 2 years ago. So that's 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 me.
Nice. Love it. Alex,
Hell yeah.
Alex, let me ask you this question. How
Yeah.
long in between viewings of this movie and the last time you saw it?
So I think it's probably been around, I want to say 5 to 7 years is like the vague estimate I'm going to throw out there. I saw this movie probably a couple years after it came out. I didn't see it in theaters, but I saw it when I was around college age, and I saw it when I was first getting into like different types of movies and different types of cinema, and it's definitely a movie I consider part of like my pantheon of, you know, cinema awakening movies, where it was like, oh, movies can do these types of cool things too. So I've long held it in really high esteem, because it was one of those formative movie watches for me when I was, in my late teens, early 20s. I definitely saw it a couple of times around that time period, probably. I think this may have been like the sixth or seventh time I've seen this movie. Um, I probably saw it, four times within a 3 year span in my late teens, early 20s. Um, and then, there was a big gap before this latest rewatch. And I was sharing this with you guys over text, but I think one of the biggest things that struck me on this rewatch was kind of how you were saying about the realistic parts of the memory erasing scenes, Dustin, is how horrific those were.
Oh yeah.
Where you see Jim Carrey like watching himself, very clearly having out of body experiences. There's all these dissonant noises playing, and I think Michel Gondry, who I believe was a music video director, uses ambient sound really well to like make things feel discordant and fucked up. Um, where the feeling those beginning scenes gave me is, um, during the times of my life when I've been under general anesthesia, there's kind of like a moment of panic when you're fading out of consciousness. It's like, fuck, I'm going to be majorly out of control. Dangerous things are going to be happening. And you freak out just as you're going under. It's usually as you're seeing like things happening in the operating room. And I think they captured that like feeling of terror and helplessness of having a procedure being done to you, when you're immobile. Um, I thought that was something that really jumped out at me is just how anxiety inducing, like my heart was thumping during the first half hour,
Hmm.
in a way that I didn't remember. Because I think in my memory, I tend to remember, um, the kind of gauzy dream sequences that we get later in the movie when Joel and Clementine are trying to like go further and further back into his memory. And, it feels very, yeah, very like, there's a warmth to those scenes. Whereas the earlier scenes of the procedure starting have this clinical coldness and, fear inducing aspect to them that really, I think, heightens the romantic elements you get later in the movie. Um, and the other thing that jumped out to me on this rewatch is how like nakedly romantic I thought the ending was, and I thought the third act was when, you're seeing this romance relationship in reverse. You have that framing device of the meet cute at the beginning, so there's that element of hope. Um, and I was watching with my wife, and it was like very beautiful to me when they make that decision at the end to, we know this could end badly. We know, like, we have these vices as people. We have these things that could make us potentially incompatible, but we're in love and it's worth it, so we're going to go for it. I thought that was, yeah, deeply optimistic, deeply romantic and humanistic, and I, you know, was very moved on this rewatch by how, you know, uplifting I found that ending, even with the context of, well, this is probably not going to work. I thought just the mutual decision that both of them make to be like, well, let's give it another go, um, is kind of like human nature and how we pursue relationships in a nutshell. And I thought that was very, very poignant on this rewatch. This is probably not in my top 10, but it might be in my top 25. And this viewing definitely solidified that. Yeah, I just adored this movie. Can't wait to rewatch. I am not going to let it be another 5 to 7 years before I do. What about you,
Yeah,
Kyle?
yeah.
How was your experience?
Oh, it was amazing. It was incredible. I don't remember the last time I actually watched it. It's probably something like 7 years, something like that, maybe a little bit more. It's definitely a movie that when it came out, yeah, I was blown away by, for so many reasons. That final scene though, uh, well, yeah, where they have that, I don't know, beautiful resignation about what they are embarking on while the tape is playing in the background of Joel's character just, railing on all the problems. And I mean that is going on, and they still want to go through that. To me, that that just like personally is the emotional chord that really, I don't know, hits me very, very, very hard. The like, yeah, things aren't going to be great, but we're going to do it anyway because there are going to be some really beautiful moments along the way, and we're taking a risk, and it's got a lot of Nietzschean eternal return, amorph fatigue stuff where it's just, you want to live, if you had to live your life over and over again in the exact same way, like you want to live your life in a way where you're good with that happening. And that final scene feels a lot like that, like you're good with all that's going to come, the good and the bad, which I think is super powerful. But also just it's funny that your reaction to the hair, Dustin, was like a little bit pulling you away because it just created something that like now is a problem for me. Or not really, because I'm happily married with a child, but like any girl with colored hair, I was like, no, she must be interesting.
Mhm.
And so it did like the exact opposite for me. And Natalie Portman's character in Garden State, like this is the time of the manic pixie dream girl.
Yeah.
This is the beginning of really that coined term, and this
100%.
this yeah this movie really does that.
Can
And
I
it's
can I point something up? And just interestingly, just reading the Wikipedia about this, it talks about how a lot of critics pointed out that her character actually criticizes the idea of like a manic pixie dream girl with her quote, where I'll just read it really quick, where she tells Joel towards the end, when they're reliving a memory in the Barnes and Noble. Too many guys think I'm a concept or I complete them. I'm gonna make them alive, but I'm just a fucked up girl who's looking for my own peace of mind. Don't assign me yours. And this that it's believed that or I maybe not believed. That manic pixie dream girl term came to fruition like within a year or two after this, specifically in regards to Kirsten Stewart's character in Elizabethtown with Orlando
just
Bloom.
Dunst or
Kristen Dunst,
yeah, yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah. So, oops.
There
Not
you
going
go.
to edit that one out either.
You're good.
Kirsten Dunst's character, though. So, yeah, like, no, like, I think, but at the same time, she still kind of is. Like, I think that's part of, like, what makes this so compelling is that they're both deeply flawed people. We see it more, I feel like, of her character than his, of like the flaws as he sees them, and we hear him describing them more vividly. Her deepest critiques of him is really that he's boring and has nothing going for him. But like, I think that makes that resolution at the end, like after they've both heard each other railing on each other, and they're still like, well, I don't feel that way right now, I wouldn't say that now, and they're still resigned to like move forward. I like, that's what really hit me, Alex. It's just that like
Right.
finding that to be not to say that like I have that same adversity with my wife, like I don't, but like I feel like it resonates with me more of like understanding that loving someone means loving their flaws and embracing the whole of their person, even what you think you might not like, or things like that, and that it can be worth it if you want it to be, kind of a thing.
Yeah, and the the device of this wood panel doctor's office where they give you light brain damage, to kill your memories, and how it speaks to like relationships,
Mm-hmm.
and what they were able to, all the characters, all the writing. And this definitely introduced me to Charlie Kaufman in a way that I kind of chased for a while in his work. But the idea of wanting to erase someone from your life after a very bad breakup, and also kind of no matter what you do, that not really being possible in many
Mm-hmm.
ways. Like
Mm-hmm.
the contours are always there, and how they get to that with Howard, and Mary's character, and how like
I
they're
love that subplot, and I
it's
love the
that's
texture that gives to the movie. It gives
yeah,
it undercuts the entire premise of the memory erasing.
yes,
In addition to the whole everything that we experience with Joel and Clementine, we see what a fool's errand it is with like the gravitational pull that Mary has towards the Tom Wilkinson character, whose name I'm blanking on.
Howard.
Howard,
Howard.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
And like the inability to do that, how you try to get rid of all the artifacts that with a relationship, that even like those little, that little scene where he's explaining like how Clementine didn't even really know him, she was with some other guy, um and the friend has this piece of paper that he's been given, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like this, it's this thing. I saw that, that I saw like when you're going through, when not even you, when someone is going through a breakup, and or has just gone through it, or is dealing with the after effects, whatever it is, and you're trying to do anything you can to like not talk about it and not bring it up and all this stuff, but like it just keeps finding its way in, and eventually he's just like, no, I'm giving him this fucking piece of paper. That to me I thought was like a very good, and how, just a very good moment of like, you don't being a friend during a breakup is like, can be very, you don't exactly know how to act or move forward
right.
sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And how every single one of these moments is like infinitely complicated ethically, with regard to how, what's right, whose wishes are supposed to be respected, what role are you supposed to play, picking sides, all this stuff. Yeah, and just wanting to, yeah, once it actually really starts to get taken from you, like wanting to hold on to it, and the violent, not violent, but like the reactions you have when someone, it's not even in real life, it's usually not someone copying all your words and actions and stepping in to have a relationship with this person that you have been with for a long time, but like that, the use of him literally taking the artifacts and the words from their past
Mm-hmm.
sort of heightens to an incredible degree that feeling of like someone is stealing my relationship, type
Right.
of stuff that can come with a breakup. Like, very rarely have I come across a movie where the device and enhances all these moments in this sort of side doorway.
Mm-hmm. Did
That
you guys?
Yeah,
Sorry,
no, you're good.
I'm curious if you guys interpreted it the same way. What Patrick, Elijah Wood's character, was doing by taking Joel's experiences with Clementine, the good parts, and using those to like kick a relationship with her. Like, I kind of interpreted it as if he had not done that, she would have been able to move on okay and wouldn't have gone to Montauk and met up with, like, because like when they start the procedure on Joel and she calls Patrick and is like, I can't, nothing makes sense or whatever, I kind of saw that as like, oh, like he's, you know, nothing that the existential soul of your memories can't be fully erased, even though if you forgot these things. And by him, by Elijah Wood kind of reenacting all these things that she experienced with Jim Carrey, she's like, this is familiar, this is right. But then like when they go up there and they're laying on the ice and he literally says Jim Carrey's words verbatim and she sits up immediately and is like, I need to go home. It's like she knows deep down and can't recognize it that this is wrong. Like, everything around this is right except for something is wrong, and isn't able to identify it as being Joel. And I feel like that logic makes sense when you think of Mary and Howard, because Howard or Mary had the procedure done herself to forget her affair with Howard, and or Howard's affair with her, but she still was there in his proximity and still kind of caught his aura and fell for his aura. If she wasn't working there and she moved to, Toma, she would have been like, it wouldn't have flared up again or become a thing again. So I thought that was just kind of like, that's how I interpreted it. I'm curious if you guys kind of saw it that same way or not. Like, that's, I don't think, a primary point of the movie at all. Like, I think that, again, to my point earlier about like this technology exists, it's just a thing. Like, it's not really the story of the movie doesn't need that line of thought to be accurate or be true for it to work. But for me, it kind of just gives it more like rationale of like why this is happening, why she's rejecting Patrick and can't figure out why, kind of a thing.
I think for me, that
no, you're wrong. No, I'm kidding.
I think for me, that moment and like what it's teasing out there with, going to such extreme that he's using the same words, but also the opening scene where it's actually the end, but it's the beginning. It's their total re-meeting after they have been or both erased. And like to the point, like he doesn't even remember Huckleberry Hound because that's been erased from his memory in this process, type of thing. And yet, it's not quite fate, mm-hmm. but it is sort of for me, it just really it hits on this idea that we do have these attractions, existential attractions, that are hard to deny. Mm-hmm. And there's something about that is like very uniquely human, whatever you want to, like type of thing. But there's just these attractions that are hard to deny. Like, for example, and I think why she, to me, some of the moments, like I do think they use what you're saying, right? Like him saying verbatim those words is really jolting her and making her feel crazy, even though she is kind of prone to that level of feeling in general. You know what I mean? Because it happens in their own relationship where Joel multiple times says something that like sets her off because it's really hitting her. This is about the baby. This is about, constantly talking, isn't necessarily communicating. And that we have these predilections that are very difficult to actually remove from our personality. And it's one of the reasons why, despite all their memories being erased of one another, they can still kind of get back together. And the Mary Howard thing is interesting because, like you said, maybe if she goes somewhere else and yada, 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 then she doesn't fall back in and have another affair with Howard and the whole thing. But I kind of feels like wherever Mary goes, she's going to find some older gentleman who she is impressed by, both for mm-hmm. their personality and their warmth and their kindness, but also their brain and their ability to just be a very impressive individual. And she's always, she'll have the Mark Ruffalo's around, but like, that's kind of what she's going to go after more. And Joel, why do I fall in love with every woman who shows me the slightest bit of attention? And Clementine, mm-hmm. Kind of being attracted to these boring guys in a lot of ways because they are a counterbalance to her. And so I guess I interpreted it as just like more of a that scene. I definitely agree. It's like how it's being used in the film, but what it just gives to me is more. We have these kind of grooves, and there's a lot of agency in the grooves, and there's a lot of like you are reliving and doing the same things over and over again and like it's finding the right little pathway in the groove to be comfortable and accept the flaws in the whole thing. But yeah, that's kind of what I took from that.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you, Kyle, on all that. I think it's about the gravitational pull of our attraction and who we're attracted to, and there being no real way to erase that part of our memories or our personality. I think it definitely, to both of your points, the Patrick character is being used as a narrative catalyst, as a way to like jolt Clem into getting on the train when she does. But I think she would have ended up there the same way that Joel did, because Joel did not have that similar, catalyst acting on him. He ended up at the train station even after this very traumatic, kind of faulty memory wiping procedure that didn't quite work. So they had their very different stressors working on them, and they both ended up there. So I think Joel being attracted to someone like Clementine would have happened regardless, and vice versa. And with Mary and Howard, yeah, totally agree. If she had, you know, left, left in disgust, moved all the way across the country, she would have still found that gravitational pull towards men like Howard, towards those, intellectually commanding yet compassionate authority figures who, she could kind of daydream about. Um, but it is really interesting how it's used in the movie. And I think on like an acting level, I think Elijah Wood makes a great minor antagonist. And I think this is kind of a fun part of
Yeah.
his filmography where he did this, and this role reminds me of his character in Sin City, who is also a total fucking creep, but in a different way.
Yeah, in a much darker way.
Much darker way. He also was in like a horror movie called Maniac,
Oh
which
yeah,
is
also even darker.
way even darker than Sin City. So I think he realized like at this point, yeah, let's ditch Frodo. Let's go with the creepy guys, and it worked
Yeah.
out well for him.
Yeah, and just like more on like the device that I just found amazing is the ability to be going through and simultaneously acting out the memories and then be able to reflect on them with the character in the moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Dustin,
Yeah.
you're talking about that manic pixie dream girl line where she says it and then they're immediately able to like just be there in their relationship. And I think one of Joel's response to that line is like, I still thought you were going to save my life. You know what I mean? Even
Yeah.
after you said that. And she's like, I know
Yeah.
you did. And that kind of like that resignation, but also like beautiful resignation, right? Is like, it really, yeah, to me, it was I hadn't really gone through many relationships or breakups when this movie came about, and I have in 20 years. Um, but yeah, that like it really hit home in all those ways, just about how what a relationship can do to you and break you down and make you
Hmm.
love and hate another person at a time and be vindictive. But you know I mean, every single emotion all at once. And just when they're going through those final moments of the first time they met, and she's like, what do we do? And she's like, just enjoy it, you know what I mean? And just like how it really, I'll put it to you this way: it just gets those tiny little moments that you latch onto. You know what I mean? In a personal narrative of love, like when she takes the chicken in their initial meet. And to me, this is also just there's the two movies that I think of when it comes to interesting, enriching portrayals of the mind that are wildly creative and informative and entertaining. For me, it is the Inside Out world and this movie.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
those two movies, and now there's two Inside Outs, but the way that they handle the mind and how it works and the rules and non-rules that exist within it, and it's like, man, it's just so fascinating to watch and entertain. And I do think, Dustin, when you watch this movie again, whenever that is, you will pick up on a lot more just little subtleties, that are thrown in that I think really, I don't know, just go the extra mile and take this movie to the next level for me.
Yeah.
Because there's so many little things, that that I just keep seeing when I see this movie. Yeah, and it was a nice departure from Titanic for Kate Winslet, and me in that like that was who she was entirely. And
Yeah.
man, yeah, and the devastating nature of that okay at the end, that is, like, again, it's tragic and it's super bittersweet. It's super happy. It's super, Yeah. Such a great portrayal of just the utter complication and complete, I don't know, whatever, like almost Heisenberg uncertainty principle esque nature of a
Mm-hmm.
relationship. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like where you can't, every
It's
time you try to, you know.
the other stupidity of love.
Mm-hmm.
Is really what it is. It's
Mm-hmm.
like it's the dumbest, best thing on the planet,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there's really no. It exists on both ends of that spectrum, and that's what makes it what it is, which sucks, but also
Is
works.
amazing.
And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Is yeah. And this I don't know about you guys. This movie for me also took me to a stratospheric level of Jim Carrey appreciation.
Mm,
Like, and so when we were texting, and you guys said you hadn't seen Man in the Moon, neither of you have seen Man in the Moon, right?
That's correct for me.
well, Man on the Moon, I've seen parts of, but you said
Okay.
Jim and Andy.
Yeah, Jim and Andy is it's a documentary that with a lot of
Yeah,
Jim Carrey.
I've
Yeah,
only
with
seen. Yeah, I haven't. I mean, I need to watch Man on the Moon from start to finish. I don't think I've
yeah,
seen parts of it in 15 years.
yeah, for a Jim Carrey dramatic piece, but also one that's like very Jim Carrey. To watch that and then eventually watch Jim and Andy, that's he's incredible. I fucking love Jim
Yeah.
Carrey, man.
I'm excited
Yeah.
to do that. And I do, maybe we can end on like the Jim Carrey ness of his performance in this movie. I loved how the like traditionally manic Jim Carrey came out the deeper you got into the recesses of the memory, and
Yeah.
how it was almost like this, you know, pure like Freudian id of, you know, the kind of mild mannered, mealy mouthed you know, character he plays for much of the movie. Like you see, you know, this manic force that he has within him that Clementine is surely attracted to. And I think it's just great when he gets to have those moments, like when he's, you know, they're fake smothering each other, and it's like, you know, it's pure '90s Jim Carrey. It's great stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad. I'm really glad that that this exercise has gotten that one off your list, Dustin. That's
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. So am
Name
I.
of the game,
Well,
baby.
we'll leave our listeners in suspense for our next episode if they can't see what it is, because I want to hash it out with you guys. So I guess we'll say goodbye. Thank you for listening.